Welcome into the latest edition of our Cubs REKAP Podcast. I'm David Kaplan. Gordon Wittenmyer is my partner, and we have a special guest here in our studios. It's Jed Hoyer, the president of the Chicago Cubs. Thank you for taking time on a busy week with convention coming
even
up.
if we kidnapped you to make this happen.
No, it's great. It's closer to home than work, so
It is
perfect.
Gets you right over there. So you've got the convention coming up. You made the move to get Kyle Tucker. Now, what's left on your shopping list? Because you know the fan base. Okay, Tucker's done. Now go get us more.
I mean, mostly focused right now, bench and bullpen, just trying to supplement the roster as much as we can. I feel good about our team, but I definitely think there's obviously ways to improve, and we'll just keep on looking at the free agent market and the trade market to see if we can do that.
There's a report out there about third base, Alex Bregman, and maybe he comes at a shorter term deal, whether it's like Bellinger or whatever. And I know you got Matt Shaw coming, but what about that?
Yeah, I mean, obviously I wouldn't comment on any report. I would just say, like, we're kind of looking to supplement the roster, and
that would be a good supplement, right?
Yeah. And no, I was going to say, I feel like this time of year, I say it over and over and over. Most, if not all, almost all rumors are not true. I think that, people use the media, agents will use the media to drive things, and a lot of stuff isn't true. And I'll be honest with you, I've actually gotten to the point of like just trying to avoid that stuff at all costs. I find that most of the information is misinformation, and therefore it actually like kind of leads us in the wrong direction. So I was just always, I say at a convention every year, just take everything with a huge grain of salt, and realize that a lot of things you read out there are put out there. So we'll just continue to, like I said, continue to try to upgrade the roster. I think there are, certainly good players out there in free agency that can make us better, and we'll continue to talk to them.
You're definitely not done.
No, we're not done. And we're not done. We'll continue to, we've been very active. I think we'll be active really, I think the way the world works now, you're active through spring training, you're active all season. But certainly the rest of this offseason, there's a lot of good players still in free agency. And, obviously we'll work hard to supplement the roster.
Do you suspect that you're going to look maybe more toward pitching at this point, maybe bullpen in particular?
Yeah, the bullpen's been probably the area we've been focused on most in free agency. I do feel like trying to make sure we upgrade our bench, add some, maybe a veteran presence to our bench would be good. I love the fact that we have all these good prospects that can come up and help, but you don't want to have a ton of prospects on your roster in roles that you want to play every day in Iowa or be playing most every day in Chicago. I don't think having those guys as bench players makes a lot of sense. So we'll be looking at different bench options to make sure that that we're deep.
So I watched the feature about the 04 Red Sox on Netflix, and it was awesome. Absolutely spectacular. There's a bunch of you in there. There's a bunch of Theo in there. But what struck me is, and I'm, I do this for a living, but I'm also a diehard Cubs fan. I thought last year's team was so boring. It was vanilla. It just was, from my perspective. Fans said the same thing. And then I watched Kevin Millar and Big Papi. It became organic, and Pedro, it became organic. But Kevin Millar, man, that guy kept everybody loose. Can we get not necessarily him, but a guy like that to lighten things up?
Didn't he piss off teammates too with flapping his gums in the off season over the A-Rod stuff?
It's interesting, right? Because, we got him. We'd heard he was a great clubhouse guy. And I said it in the documentary. Like, I think people underestimated what a big deal it was to steal him from Japan. I mean, no one did that. That was
because MLB would not have wanted you to do that.
Well, and it was just a gentleman's agreement that if you put a guy on waivers for that purpose, that it would happen. And Theo was 28 and was like, I don't care about the gentleman's agreement. I'm just going to do it. And so we ended up getting him. It's almost like one of those moves I don't know if he would have done 10 years later, but at that point in his career, he did it.
You guys were doing a lot of that, right? Because the draft had the slots,
yeah,
and you guys were ignoring the slots along with about a half dozen other teams.
Yeah, looking back, like to that point, like we just paid as many people as we could in the draft. It was so, looking back, it's so obvious to do, but there was a gentleman's agreement that you didn't do it, and we sort of broke that as well. But anyway, Millar was amazing, and I would say, I traveled with a team so much back then, and I'd be on the road, and you could only hear one person. You'd be sitting in Tito's office, and you hear one person. It was always Millar. You just hear him all the time. I'm sure there was times it was grating on his teammates. It's this guy nonstop, but he brought everyone together. He was friends with every group on the team. He brought everyone together. He's hilarious. And so he's really kept it light. And that team did have, like, more than any team I've ever been around, that team had just a million characters. And it really did, the way they did the documentary, it was, it really felt like the 2 years felt like 1 year in a way. Like 03 and 04, like, kind of felt like the same team. And those 2 years were unbelievable. Like, that group, just, they had real chemistry. Ortiz had a huge personality. Damon had a huge personality. Millar had a huge personality. And I do think there's a reason that group ended up breaking the curse, because I do think it probably took a group of players like that to do it. It wasn't going to be a timid group, and they certainly weren't.
So can we get a guy like that? I'm not talking about the player.
Yeah.
That personality, because a lot of fans said
Cubs had him.
this Cubs team. It wasn't an unlikable team last year. It was just a vanilla team.
So in my experience, though, like, it's very difficult to go out and get that guy. Very few guys like that exist.
Especially now.
I agree with you. I think that's a little more, I don't say corporate, but it's a more buttoned up environment
Reserved.
than it used to be. There's cameras everywhere now. People are just more wary.
And just a generation of players and their social awareness.
Yeah, it's very different. So it's hard to find that kind of guy. And in my experience, when you hear about a guy who's a great clubhouse guy, it really depends on how the guy's playing. There's very few people in my career that I would say are a leader who can lead when they're struggling. Like, actually, David Ross is one of the best I've ever been around. Like, when he struggled in 2015, he did not play well at all in 15. Everyone was, get rid of this guy. But he was able to lead. He knew that was part of what he was getting paid for. He never, like, lost that.
You had just the right roster for it too, with incredibly young guys.
Yeah, but he understood that even I'm hitting whatever $180, but, like, part of what I'm getting paid for is that leadership.
Right.
And very few guys look at it that way. So most guys, when they struggle, they go internal, their leadership goes away, and then all of a sudden they start playing well, and it comes back out. And so finding players who are able to lead through struggles, really hard.
Going back to this offseason, just in the last week plus is when Roki Sasaki narrowed his list down, and suppose there's 3 teams now, and he's going to make his decision here very soon. But you were one of the teams one of the first teams, by my understanding, to get a proposal into the drop box, right?
Yeah.
How disappointing was it to hear that he took you off the list, and how close do you think you came to making a case with him?
Well, I think we made a really good case. We had a great meeting with him. I was proud that we got the meeting. I think we've made real progress in Japan. I think obviously, getting Seiya helped. Shota last year was fantastic. I think that, like, word gets around the league, this is a good place to play. I've got a really good relationship with Joel Wolf and Wasserman. I think I've been over there 4 times in the last couple of years, and got pretty close to the people in Roki's orbit and stuff like that. And so certainly we invested unbelievable man hours and time on that process. And so obviously it's disappointing. I think when you go into the process, okay, like, you're not gonna be a favorite here. Right. I mean, I think we all knew that, a couple of the West Coast teams are likely to be, the favorite. I was definitely disappointed that we were out, but I was proud of, like, the presentation we made. I was proud of the materials. And I feel like those things generally, like, having to make a case for yourself, having to put those things together, it may not come to fruition on Roki, but I think in the future, those things usually pay dividends. But it was disappointing. I mean, for sure.
What do you think? You think it came down to West Coast, or some of the interpersonal relationships he has with the Dodgers and the Padres? Well, and the Blue Jays are still supposedly.
It's not money.
Yeah, I mean,
obviously it's
not money.
Yeah.
I mean, and I think the answer is I don't know yet. I've talked to Joel Wolf a lot. I'm sure we'll debrief for real when the whole thing's over and get a better feel for what actually drove the decision, and why we got eliminated. And I feel like that I don't feel any shame in getting eliminated along with the other teams that did.
Right.
But at the same time, like, it was really disappointing, and I want to know what we can do better in the future, or why this player made that choice. It's such I want to say it's not unique because it happened with Ohtani, but we've been involved in both those pursuits you spent 10,000 hours on both of those trying to make it happen. And they're the most high leverage things I've ever been involved in, right? Mm-hmm. You're going to get make up a number, $5-6 million of international money. You're going to get a player who's $200+ million asset. That leverage doesn't come around every day, So when it does happen, you have to really throw everything into it. And other teams did too. I mean, when you talk to other teams, they feel the same way. They're just putting everything into this, this pursuit because, again, you're getting this incredible asset. You're effectively like getting the first or second pick in the draft is probably the way to look at it.
Yeah.
Right.
And he's ready to play.
And he's ready to play. Right. Exactly. So it's a rare thing and, disappointing, but also like, I think when you enter that process, you certainly don't enter thinking, oh God, we're definitely the favorite. And, you have to say, hey, let's compete with everyone else. And I'm just as curious as anyone to see where he lands. And I have to imagine that happens in the next couple of days.
Somebody in the industry said to me, you're in the final year of your contract.
Yep.
And he said, I give him a lot of credit, man. He's staying loyal to his process. And if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. Is there some type of a thought like, what, screw it. I'm going to trade from my system. I'm going to go get that guy, and I'll get my extension.
Honestly, I mean, it's not the first time I've been last year in my deal. I mean, it's happened before. I really try to block it out of my mind. This is my 14th year here, which is kind of wild.
Did you think you'd be here this long?
Oh God, no. I was, I mean, candidly, I thought I'd try to win a World Series and I'd go somewhere else is really what I thought would happen. And then I had a feeling that Theo wouldn't stay past our second contract. And so at that point, I got to a place where I had a bunch of opportunities after we won the World Series to leave. And I was like, you know what? Let's just pretty good chance you can take over here. And we love it here. And, we start raising a family here. So, I mean, really Chicago and the Cubs and the whole thing, I think was really hard place to leave, but this is year 14. I don't work for me, I work for the Cubs, I work for the Ricketts, and that's my focus is, when people say you're in the last year, you should do this, you should do that. Like, that's not what it's about. Like, we're trying to build a winning team. We're trying to do it within the structure and constraints that we have. And we're trying to always think about, now and think about the future. And I can't just bail on that all of a sudden because I'm in the last year of my contract. I've got to, maintain the same thought process. And I think, for example, I think Kyle Tucker fits very, very well into that. I think that we are in a place where you have a bunch of really good players on good contracts. We didn't have anyone that I view as like a 5+ win player that could help carry the offense. I think he fits really well with what we're building, but I'm not just going to bail on what we believe or bail on what we were building because I'm in the last year, because it's not about me. It's about the Cubs.
Well, what he was saying about going out and spending player capital and going to you did it. Yeah. I mean, you did do that. Now, you didn't go deep into your system and get rid of your best prospects and all that. Kyle Tucker's probably arguably the best player on your roster right now. And
he's the best athlete in Chicago sports right now today.
Yeah, I wouldn't debate that. Yeah. So, ancillary question to that. You didn't get anything done with him in arbitration, and there's the idea of him maybe being in line for an extension if you could do it, but then there's talk that maybe that ain't going to happen. Sure. First of all, with that, and you probably don't want to go into too many details, but how come something didn't get done on a 1-year deal? And does that indicate that there's more conversations going on about a multi-year?
No, there's not. And listen, like at some point I'll say like, we're not going to tell anyone outside what we're working on, but arbitration is such a complicated process. I think that like there's the team and then there's the player, but then you don't have the ability to say, I really want to pay this player X, I'm going to pay him that, because obviously the whole process is based on precedent and all these different things. And so there's times when you end up exchanging numbers because of that. And I told Cap the other day when we exchanged numbers, like not something I'm not concerned about it at all. Says nothing about the relationship with me and Casey or with us and the player. I mean, clearly he's a player that you'd love to have for a long time. I mean, that's obvious. He's such a great player. He's young. He does everything well. That's a process that will go on in the future. The biggest sales point for the Cubs, he hasn't experienced yet in a lot of ways. Like, I feel like,
packed house at Wrigley, especially if you're winning.
Yeah, for me, it's like, there's a time for that. I'm sure at some point, I'll have a lot of conversations with Casey Close about that. But I also think, like, you know what? I'm just excited to get him. I mean, this weekend there'll be a convention. I'm excited to get him. We're going to Japan. We're going to come back and play in Wrigley. This place sells itself. I enjoy the recruiting part of this job, but like one of the best parts of this job is you got Wrigley and you got the fans and you got Chicago in the summer. And, that's all. Those are all things he hasn't even experienced yet that I'm sure will have an impact on him.
So that brings up an obvious follow-up in my mind.
Yeah.
You probably more than any executive I've covered likes to use the term, and everybody agrees with it. There's almost no such thing as a bad 1-year contract.
Sure.
Why not risk an overpay? Why not make sure to sort of grease the skids on whatever that sales pitch is coming up, going to be coming up?
And that's kind of what I was saying. It's complicated given you just have in the process, you just have different precedent on both sides. And so it's not quite, it's a little bit more complicated than just what we want to do, but I guess what I would say is it's something that, like, my heart rate doesn't go up like one beat about, and I'm not concerned about. And
you have like a 98% record of getting deals done.
Yeah, I'm not concerned about it. And I know our relationship with Excel and with him. And so it's just not something I'm concerned about. And I'm just excited he's on our team. I think that, like I said, to me, watching us play last year, Cody played like a star in 23 and really carried us for the middle part of the season. And it was like, that's what we lacked last year. We had a lot of good players. We just didn't have anyone that had the ability to kind of consolidate those wins in one player. And it felt like a very obvious thing that we needed. And he was a very obvious target in that regard.
Yeah.
Do you think the hidden story that people know it's out there, but fans don't want to believe it, which I understand. I'm a fan. I don't care. I just want to see good players on my team. But the RSN, Regional Sports Network's failures, the way some of those things have impacted, whether that is some of the smaller market teams, some of the middle market teams, that you cannot count on TV money like you used to be able to.
Well, I think that, it's been a really hot market this winter. I mean, the free agent market has been as fast and robust as I've seen
for the high end guys,
for the high end teams.
Yeah,
but there's also a lot of teams that haven't been. And I think I think when the dust settles on the whole offseason, I think that's going to be a real story is, wait a second, like, God, that felt like it was fast and furious, but it was among this group of teams, and this whole group of teams over here was out in the cold because of the RSNs. And it is, this sport really thrived financially on, we have 162 dates on TV, right? And that was the thing that drove the finances of what we were doing,
especially the last couple of decades.
And like, it's summer programming. So like, that's even better for TV. And I just feel like, as people, all these young people, as they started, cord cutting and people started doing different things, that ecosystem has changed. And it's never going back, right? Like, I think that's the one thing the cable money is never going to drive our finances the way it did for years. And
Right.
I think it's on baseball to figure out like how baseball is going to thrive financially.
How do we get that money back?
I think that's
You guys are in better position than a lot of teams.
We sure are. Yeah. For sure.
And not only do you have your own network, but you have an international brand.
Yes.
And so that's going to play well for streaming.
Yeah.
So I asked you about this at the GM meetings in November, and you said at some point in Mesa, we'll probably know more. But I think what you're alluding to is we're seeing it, right? We're seeing some of the smaller market teams either not really get involved deeply or trade.
Yeah.
And we're seeing massive spending at the higher ends with the teams that aren't affected by this.
Yeah.
You guys are kind of at least on the one side of the ledger. And it seems, your biggest move has been a trade. You've done some free agency stuff too. How much thought, how much ability was there to like really leverage your position in this market and do more from a big market standpoint?
Especially with teams in your own division, some
At least
going a
3
different
teams
direction.
have gone
Yeah.
backwards.
Milwaukee lost their
Yeah.
closer and their star shortstop.
St. Louis has
Cardinals.
taken a massive step back.
Right.
Yeah, there's no question that it feels like when you look at the spending, it's definitely been on the coast. The middle, the middle of the country has probably been more affected by the cable stuff than the coast. And so, yeah, I mean, listen, the off season's not over, and obviously, I never kind of divulge what our payroll is, but yeah, I think we're definitely in better position than a lot of our peers. And but as a whole, it is a concern for the whole industry that you've got certain teams that are unaffected by the cable stuff, and then certain teams that are significantly affected. And like I said, like it's not going to go back. Like, people aren't going to suddenly say like, you know what, like cord cutting didn't work, I want to go back to cable. Like it's not going the other direction. It's only going to get worse.
So if you picked up the phone, you're in first place by 6 games, July 30th. And the phone rang and you could get a guy, but he's got multiple years left at big money. But that team says, we got to move him. Jed, you want him? And you go, that guy puts me over the top. You can't guarantee a World Series, but that gives us a great shot to win the World Series. Do you believe ownership would greenlight a spend like that?
Yeah, I think for sure. I mean, I think that, I always go back to, you have to know your team, you have to know your position. And I feel like there's times when, being super aggressive at the deadline is exactly the right thing to do. I mean, I think that, the quote that we kept saying over and over in 16, when we were preparing to either go get Andrew Miller or preparing to go get,
if not now,
or both.
If not now, when? And it was like, that was the whole thing. Like, we have the best team in baseball by a significant margin, and there's no guarantees that everything's going to line up in the future. I think that's the thing. Probably as for better or for worse, I've been doing this a long time. My kid's biggest takeaway from the comeback was my hair, I think. But like the biggest thing is like there are years where everything lines up, where you're in great position, where whether it's what your division's like, whether it's like how your team's set up, that everything lines up, and you have to take advantage of those years, because there's other years where you might have a better team, but you have injuries, or things aren't lining up in the same way, or the trade market doesn't line up in the same way. And so you've got to take those opportunities. And I think about some of the bigger shots on goal that we've taken in my career, trading for Chapman, certainly the Nomar trade was something we
with
felt
the Cubs,
like we had to do.
Boston.
And even I would even go back to in 2007 in Boston, like we thought we were making our team a lot better by trading for Eric Gagne at the deadline. It didn't actually work, but it was certainly a big shot at the time to add another big reliever. So when you're in position, you have to take those shots, because we all know the margins are thin, and some years they line up and everything, you get the wind at your back, you have to take advantage of that.
You added clearly the best player among the 5 teams in the division so far. You say you're not done. You've got a starting rotation that can win a playoff series, if not more than that. Assuming you add to the bullpen, you guys are the clear-cut favorites at this point as we sit here in the division. But as you pointed out, all that spending on the coasts, teams, the rich got richer, the strong got stronger. What gives you confidence that, assuming you take care of business in the division, that more than that could be in play, given everybody else's strength?
No, I mean, I think that yes, like people talk about the division a lot. And by the way, I think we have some really good teams in our division for sure, with a lot of young talent. But yeah, there's no question, like the big behemoths on the coast, they got better, and the National League is a bear right now. It is. I mean, I've talked to a number of executives in both leagues, and it feels like right now the talent has been flowing into the National League for several years.
Yeah, for sure.
And so I think that when I look at last year, I mean, like the Diamondbacks missed the playoffs, and they were a really good team, but they have, I think, 88 wins or so. Then they missed the postseason
after getting to the World Series.
And then
add Corbin Burns.
And so there's a lot of really good teams in the National League. There's been a lot of talent going that direction, and it's hard. I mean, the game has really changed in that regard. I think back even to 15, 16, 17, it just felt like there's a lot of bad teams you could beat up on.
They were tanking.
When I look back at we won 97 games in 2015. like a lot. We won 8 in a row to end the season against teams that were out of the race and not trying. And so that doesn't really happen anymore. I think it's a big difference. Like, I feel like now when you play the schedule, you'll look at a month and be like, man,
where are we getting wins here?
Yeah, there's not an easy series in this month, and you just kind of crank out one challenging series after another. Some against the best teams, but some like this against good, solid teams. That, I mean, there's only a handful of teams in baseball. Not even a handful. There's only a few teams that really you'd say are like on the competitive side, going the other direction. Mm-hmm. And usually, I feel like that number was double that, if not more, over the past 10, 15 years. So I just feel like wins are at a premium. You got to earn your wins now. It's a harder league from a balance standpoint than ever since I've been in the league.
But if you take care of business in the division, if you get to the playoffs, how do you beat those teams? Is it that rotation?
I do think that, like, I mean, when I think about the postseason, there's certainly years it plays out like the 100+ win team just goes and takes care of business. But like, I look at 2 years ago, I thought that, the Rangers were teetering going into the playoffs and they won the World Series. The D-back, it was us, the D-backs and the Marlins fighting for that last spot. And the D-backs barely snuck in and they ended up going to the World Series. And so I do think that is where our sport, I do think getting in is what really matters. Like what happens. I thought the Brewers last year were a fantastic team, and they
get in and they're gone.
They give up a
Alonso.
random home run, they give a home run and they're out. And so it's just, you realize the margins are so unbelievably thin. I mean, I even think, at least I think about that stuff all the time. I think go back to 2016, how close we were to losing to the Giants and how close we were to losing to the Indians. And frankly, even the Dodgers, like it's just hard to win it's hard to win playoff series. Like
2004.
Oh my God. Stolen base, the ball, Tony Clark hit the ball that bounced over the wall instead of being a ground rule double. It bounced instead of being a triple, it bounced over the wall. So the guy didn't score. So I mean, there's so many things in any series that you have to look back on. I don't feel like it's like that in the NBA, for example. Like I feel like in the NBA, those early rounds, for the most part, those the 1 and 2 seeds take care of business, and they that isn't what happens in baseball. I mean, listen, the Dodgers were, playing they had a bullpen game in Game 4 this year of losing 3-1 to the Padres. I mean, you think about like they won a bullpen game and then ended up winning Game 5. Like that easily could have gone the other way, and it's a totally different conversation right now. So margins are thin.
If you could go back to 2023, you didn't do, I don't think, much except Jamer Candelario at the deadline. Yeah. You had said, Bellinger said, don't break this team up, Jed. Dansby was injured. He's my assistant GM. He's lobbying you. You finished a game short. If you could go back to 23, do you do more at the deadline?
I think clearly with hindsight being 2020.
Especially in the bullpen.
Without question, that's where we would have made the moves. I think the hardest part in hindsight was that, I don't remember the exact number of games. Let's say we won 9 out of 10 leading up to the deadline that year.
Right.
I mean, I thought we were selling the whole month. I mean, really, like the whole month.
So your staff is looking as a seller.
Well, why wouldn't we? We were 7 games under 500 on like the 20th of July, right? And so I feel like, we got to a place of not selling. We needed a bat. We added, but like, I look back, like what I wish is that we played better a little bit earlier to kind of, prove it. Okay. Because the run we made at the end of July was actually also against some pretty poor teams. St. Louis was really struggling that year. The White Sox were struggling. And so I wish we had played better earlier is the honest answer, because I think had we been 5 or 6 over there at that point, and maybe it gives more clarity. Like, okay, we have to push more here. But yeah, I think obviously, like if you had a crystal ball, we would have added to the bullpen. We got to 12 over right around Labor Day, a little bit after Labor Day. We were 12 over. It looked like we were 95% likely, and we just kind of ran out of gas. I mean, honestly, we got a bunch of bad breaks and weird things happened, but we ran out of gas in the bullpen. Guys got hurt. And ultimately, we just didn't have enough to hang on.
No,
And we still lost that game,
Those Diamondback series too.
Oh, the
That
Diamondback
head-to-head
series
was the
Gut
difference.
wrenching.
Yeah, actually, you talk about Roki. I'll never forget. I was in the Seibu Dome, and I'm watching Roki, and I'm watching our game, that nightmarish game that I think really cost us the playoffs when Bellinger got, they called it a double play. Remember that he got hit by a pitch. It was a hit by a pitch, and then the ball bounced up in the air and hit him, and then Wesneski, that ball that hit off Wesneski, he had 2 strikes on Rivera and didn't strike him out, and we ended up losing that game in extra innings. It felt like we just needed that win. I was watching that game on my phone while I was sitting there trying to scout Roki. It was a bad morning in Japan.
Not good.
It was a bad morning, but those two series killed us. And then obviously the Brave series at the end of that season was
That was brutal.
Yeah,
If you could go back through your time, let's call it from 2015 on, God, I wish I could have a do-over on that move. Would it be going to get Verlander? What would it be?
Your favorite.
Yeah, that's a good one.
I called him the day of the trade deadline. I called him and I said, I just got a call from somebody with Justin because his agent's a friend of mine. And you said, we're done. We don't have anything left.
Yeah. No, I mean, I've thought about that one a lot because that would have been a really good move. I think that the obvious one I look back was non-tendering Schwarber. I think
obvious.
We felt like, we drafted him. I'm like, this guy's going to bat third for us for a long
decade.
time and be our leader. And it never quite clicked. He clicked at times, but like for halves, but never for the full season. And then we just didn't have any money after COVID. I had to cut money, and that was the move we had to make. But I look back on that one, it feels like, we were right about the player in the end. We were right. We ran out of time and patience and money, and like I feel like he should be a Cub. That's kind of how I look at it, right? They're like, we got the evaluation right. We got the timing wrong.
Is there a deal that you could have
every
made?
time I talk to him.
What's that?
Is there a deal that you had on the table? I could have made that deal and I didn't, now that years have passed.
I've got one that I won't. I have one that keeps me up at night.
Tell us.
No chance.
Why?
No. This
How
is
long
like
ago?
11 years ago.
Oh, you got to tell.
No.
Limitations is over.
I went out. No, someday.
Is he still playing?
Nightmare Fuel. Yeah. So I think I have this theory that
Sure.
when any of us retire, like once the people are out of the game that will be affected by it, everyone should have to disclose like the 5 worst deals they proposed and the 5 worst deals that you didn't do, because the stories would be like unbelievable, right? Like, because everyone has them, right? Like, this prospect that it's a rookie, an A-ball guy that someone throws into a deal, you say no to, and like a guy ends up going, winning 2
like the
MVPs
Cubs turning down Bartolo Colon for Scott Bullitt and Steve Traxel. They would
You're
have
not
been in the
talking
deal.
about the DJ LeMahieu trade, are you?
No, that was a bad one. But this is different. So anyway,
Did you guys know who DJ LeMahieu was when you made the deal, or you just
He could have played third base for you. That's the irony.
I mean, the lesson learned in the DJ LeMahieu one was a good one, which is like, we got here, we did not have good scouting reports on him in San Diego. We did not have good scouting reports on him in Boston. So we get here and it's like that's what we have. We're product of what we had, right?
Mm-hmm.
And we come here and like, the guy, Randy Bush and Tim Wilkin and those guys are like, yeah, this guy, he's got great makeup, he's a good player. And we're like, yeah, these guys are biased, they drafted him, blah, blah, blah. And like, we just didn't know what we had.
That was
that was the mistake, is like what we had wasn't positive, but we should have listened to these guys and frankly, just not made a big move or make a move like that the first winter before you really know the players. That was the lesson. It's like I think we were overly eager to like make a move.
The one you won't tell us, what position does he play?
Pitcher. Oh, but I guess my point is like
14.
My point is everyone has,
and he's still pitching
these kind of deals, and I think everyone should have to disclose them later on.
That'd be a great book.
Because it'd be a great book. Like all these deals, like you hear about all these deals through the grapevine. and you're like, oh my God.
So it had to be somebody who was a prospect, maybe a prospect at the time that you had a chance to get. Huh?
Not going to do it, man. I'm not going to do it. Someday. But anyway, we all have those deals. And listen, I stand by this 100%. It is very important in this job, in this game, to be transactional. And I think that the team, you have to be transactional. You have to be making deals. I think having a fear of, you're going to make mistakes. You're betting on human beings, and like some of the best GMs in baseball, and people look up to the most, have made mistakes, but they would just say, like, you know what, like, you keep making deals and you have a good process and you believe in your conviction that you're going to make a lot more good deals than bad deals. And you got to have that attitude.
Theo told me once, if you hit on 58% of your moves,
that sounds kind of high,
you will be a star GM.
Yeah. And that's the reality. You can't get gun shy. You have to make those kind of deals.
Did you ever have a deal potential? Maybe you did it, maybe you didn't, where you and Theo are not coming to blows, but you're screaming at each other like, have you lost your effing mind? We can't do that, or we have to do that.
Well, he didn't want any part of Arrieta, and I did, so that was it. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. So, yeah, no, I mean, I think that, like, you have all the time. You have these, you have these debates and these discussions, and I think part of why we worked together well for so long is that we would disagree. We didn't back down from each other.
Did you have screaming matches?
We got loud. I think it was funny because I think there was times we would really go back and forth, and I think people would be like, "Oh no, like Jed and Theo aren't getting along." It's like, we're fine.
So this guy you didn't get, this pitcher you didn't get, this had to be right about the time frame of Arrieta then.
It was.
I was 13.
I will say the time frame was like when we were still building. But I'll say this: you were talking about deals, and like we were talking about things that like you regret. And I'll say, like, I've said this before, like, I look back, like, one of the best processes I ever ran led to the worst trade I ever made. And that was like, we when I was in San Diego, we were, the lowest payroll in baseball. We were in first place at the deadline. We had to get offense. And I worked out this 3-way deal to get Ryan Ludwig. And I talked the Indians off of like 25 prospects, like literally. And I had, like, we've gone through so many iterations of sending scout after scout to see our system. And we had everything ranked out, and just kept saying no. I kept saying no. And finally they asked about Kluber, and we said yes. And we traded him to Cleveland. I think he had like a high 5 ERA in AAA his first year with them, and then won 2 Cy Youngs. And I remember looking back at our notes, and
almost had a chance to beat you in 16.
Oh my God. Yeah, I will say that there was definitely some moments in that World Series where I thought this was like some like divine joke. Like,
right.
Like, wait, the worst trade you ever made, and now that's going to haunt you in your next job. Like, you're like, you're
right. In Game
terrible.
7.
But I would say, like, I look back on my notes from like all the people that they asked about that I said no, and like those guys are out of the league, and this guy's winning Cy Youngs, and it just goes to show you something that
it happens.
And like because you're betting on humans, and I think that's hard, and you got to have a good process. You got to have a lot of really good information, and just keep making what you think are a good decision, one good decision after another.
So I am at Wrigley. I'm going to do the post game show. I bump into Theo, and he says, "Hey, stick around after the post game. We're working a kid out. We're going to take him at 6 if he doesn't go first." He said, if he doesn't go first, he will be on the board when we pick 6. He's up there writing. I walk in my radio booth or TV booth, and I'm sitting there going, okay, this guy's hitting missiles at Wrigley. And it was Carlos Correa. Mm-hmm. Did you think you were getting him in that draft?
I did, but it was funny because when we worked him out, and like you go to enough workouts, and I remember it was like a kind of a cold day, and he's hitting like 1-irons into the bushes in center field. And like, oh my God, like this kid's 17 years old. And Theo and I walk away from the cage, and we kind of look at each other and we're like, that guy's not getting there. Like, that guy's going ahead of us. Right. But then we get into the draft, and we were in a side room, and we thought we were taking Correa. We had talked to his agents. We thought like we knew who was going 2, 3, 4, 5. And we had a sense like, okay, like this guy's ours. We're working on a deal. And so we're sitting in the room like, okay, we're going to take Correa first. What goes next? And then all of a sudden it was like, hey, Correa's went first. And we're like, oh, well, okay. Like,
Well, guess that
all right,
never mind.
change that. But I remember we thought we were getting him at 6. And that stuff
That's what he
happens
told
in
me.
the draft. I remember in San Diego, in 2010, I thought we had Lindor. I was I was on the phone working on a deal with his agent because he said he wasn't going to go ahead of us. And then
He
all of a
went
sudden,
8.
He went 8. Yeah.
And then Baez
went 9.
before
Baez
you.
went 9.
Two guys from the same place.
Yeah, but it's like, those things happen in the draft. Like, it's a draft. Guys get taken right ahead of you. So,
Hey, looking again at this division going in, how this guy? How big a difference is Francona going to make in this division? You guys got the best player that came in, but he might be the best free agent.
no, Tito is fantastic. He has such an amazing way about him as a person, as a manager. He connects so well with players. I think he's probably more comfortable in a major league clubhouse than any person I've ever been around. And I think he's just really good tactically. He's, I think about the guy loves to play cards. He loves to play, he's playing cribbage all day long. He loves to make bets. His mind works really quickly. And I think he makes really good bets in game. So he's going to have a huge impact on them. I think that the respect rightfully that he has after all the success he's had, both in Boston and Cleveland, I think this carries over. So I think he'll have a huge impact. And, they have a really good young team. That's when you're talking about the division. Like, I thought they were excellent at the end of 23.
Yeah.
They had that run. They kind of ran out of steam a little bit at the end. They got so banged up, but
McLean was missed the last month.
But when we were playing them in June and July, they were phenomenal. And obviously last year didn't quite click for them. I talked to Nick Kroll a lot about that. They just felt like it never quite came together for them as a
their
team.
entire pitching staff.
Yeah.
Out.
But they, I think they're really talented. I think Tito will make a big difference.
That's interesting. Okay, here's an interesting concept then. Big name free agent signed Snell and Soto and all that. Where does Tito rank as a free agent in terms of what kind of impact he could make?
No, you never know, right? It's hard to quantify the war of a manager, but certainly, having a established manager is going to create a great culture. I think that makes a huge difference. And like I said, for a young team like that, I think it'll have a big impact.
I did ask him one thing when I was talking to him not too long ago. I asked him about you guys because a year ago you guys replaced the manager.
Yeah.
And the roster didn't change a ton. He swapped out a couple of pretty good starters and some relievers and stuff, and wound up winning the same number of games. And I asked him about that, almost in terms of a cautionary tale. And, he just, we hope we can do some things here and there, classic answer. But I wonder, when you look back at that, if you rethink any of the process, either rethink the manager change itself or just what happened afterwards, just in the off season.
Yeah. Honestly, like when I look back on the last season is one of the more confounding seasons when I look back on it, because we were a really good team in April and we were a really good team July, August, and September. Yeah. And we just played awful baseball for 2 months. And, you can try to pick it apart and you can blame different areas, but the fact of the matter is really like we pitched terribly in the bullpen and had really struggled in high leverage. That is undeniable. But also during that exact same time, we had the worst offense in baseball for 2 months. Yeah. And, then all of a sudden for the last 3 months of the season, we had the offense that we thought we had.
Was it weather related?
I think the weather impacted our offense.
Yeah, it was the worst part to hit it.
And it made our pitching our pitching was probably a hair above what it should have been, and our hitting was below. But just in general, we just played awful baseball for 2 months and dug ourselves way too big of a hole. I felt like we were definitely a better team last year than we were the year before. Felt like the year before we got some better individual performances out of guys.
Like Belly
played better. Dansby and Nico were excellent.
I think Belly had twice the WAR.
At least. Yeah. And last year, we really, I give Council a lot of credit. We were buried and we once again, we dug out of this huge hole. And it's just what I learned in both of those seasons is like, there's an energy expended digging out of a hole that's really challenging.
Joe used to talk about that. Matt,
yeah, like when you have to sprint, we went from 10 under to 12 over in 23. You have to redline your bullpen to do that.
Mm-hmm.
You have to win every game. You can't back off a little bit. You're having to sweep series. You're having to wins 5 out of 6, 6 out of 7, and so I do think to make that kind of comeback, there's a mental toll and a physical toll on your players that it's really hard.
Do you take your phone into the bathroom with you?
I do.
You're human.
That's what Tito
Have you
does.
ever made a trade while you're sitting there in the bathroom and you're like, oh God, I got to answer this. This is that GM.
I wouldn't take the call. I would not take the call. But yeah, I mean, listen, it's for better, for worse, like you're just tethered to these things now. And it doesn't feel like there's not only is it never an off season, there's not like even a weekend.
You carry 2 phones?
I don't.
Just one.
Just one.
Still have the fake Twitter account.
I get.
That's a real Twitter account. It's just he
Yeah,
he didn't.
We just don't know.
An
it's him.
acquaintance of mine started it.
Yeah.
But yeah, so even weekends, it just feels like at this point, especially in the off season, if that's the day the deal is going to go down, then it happens.
Your wife understands. This is the life she signed up for.
She met me when I was already doing this, so I think that's been. But that part's gotten worse and worse with technology. I mean, I actually did the Matt Boyd deal at 2 a.m. on a Sunday night after Thanksgiving, and it's like not what you expect when you expect to do it, but that was when it happened. And I just think that's the
how does that happen at that time on that day?
Do they call you and wake you up? What happens?
No, we started at 10, but that's the one thing. A lot of the agents, most of the agents live on the West Coast.
Oh yeah, right.
So
2 to them is 12.
yeah,
We're good.
So we started talking at like 10. And then it became clear that it was going to happen that night. And I think we wrapped it up at like 2 a.m. or something like that.
Geez.
So, I mean, those things happen. And that's just the nature of the job in today. And totally different. Like when I first got in the game, people, I knew a lot of old GMs that would go to games and not look at their phone the whole time. And it just feels like that's a
there was no
era.
iPhone then, or
that's a bygone era. Yeah.
Totally different.
Yeah.
In terms of how a deal comes about, like you guys have dealt, most of the GMs, each other.
Yeah.
Okay, I want that. How do you do it? I want that guy, or I hear you're looking to move that guy. Like, how do you cut through the bullshit?
Well, there's always an art to it too, right? Because if you go too hard after one guy, they either
I got you.
Or they feel like, wait a second, I need to reevaluate this guy.
Maybe I should keep him.
Yeah. So I think there's always an art with different people. But yeah, there's certainly, I mean, everyone has a scouting report on you got a mental scouting report on all the different GMs and all the agents, and like they probably have one on us, and like how everyone kind of deals with everyone. You're not going to deal with everyone the same way. How certain people are super straight shooters, and it's just like you can get to a deal quickly or nothing, and then some, there's going to be 65 phone calls back and forth, and you just have to know that going in. Everyone has different styles.
So there's some guys, Jed, let's cut through the bullshit. I got to move him. That's what I want. You in or out?
Yeah, like I'll say like Brian Cashman, for example. I've done a bunch of deals with him, and it's a lot of good conversation, but like it's few phone calls. It's pretty direct. It's like, it's not a lot of back and forth. He will say yes, and then there's others that I think you can fill up a notebook in the back and forth, and it just different styles. They work for, I think both can be effective. It's just some people are going to go to close to their final number right away, and then that's it.
How would they say about you?
I think I'm probably a little bit in between. I've definitely gotten more direct as I've done this longer. I think that there's more willingness. No, that's not something I think I realized as I've done it longer, you're just saving everyone time if you sort of cut that off. Whereas I think early on
that's not going to happen. Don't waste your time.
Early on, I think I probably was more willing. I'll take a look at that, or let me get back to
now
it.
it's no.
Now it's that's not what we're doing.
You got any irons in the fire right now? You got any dialogue going right now like this?
Yeah, no. I mean, we have a lot of dialogue. I think that it's only January 15th, and I feel like January 15th is the new December 15th. Honestly,
good Lord.
That's how I look at it. It really, it's
getting worse.
Yeah, it bums me out in a lot of ways. The way these off seasons have the way this whole thing has evolved, it used to be that everyone wanted to have a job by Christmas, and like you could kind of count on January being more of a arbitration and honestly a calm before spring training.
Should they limit it? Should they put a deadline on it like the NFL? Or
oh my God, I'd kill for that. Yeah, because I think that.
So how would you do that?
I think you just put a deadline for.
If you don't sign by this date, you cannot sign
or do
till
what they
that
did
date.
when the CBA was getting negotiated. 2 periods.
Yeah,
Like just have a dead period in between.
Yeah. Either way, I think that having a deadline, I think is good for us. Selfishly, I also think it's good for the media. It's good for the fans. I think that we're gonna go. I mean, we're gonna go to Mesa, and I guarantee you, people are gonna be asking us about free agents when we get there. That is a new thing. Right. That's not something that we dealt with before.
Most guys had jobs by then.
Most guys had jobs.
Look at the 4 guys who were still out there going last year.
We did the deal for Belly. It was almost March. I think it was like, I can't remember the exact day we finished the deal, but I think the press conference was on like the 28th of February or something like that.
Yeah. I think of the 4 guys, your guy was first.
And it was and it was almost March. Yeah. So it's like, I think that's a new thing or a recent thing. And I think for everyone, that'd be great if we kind of go to spring training and we're going early this year. We've got a Japan trip. So we're actually going out there 4 or 5 days earlier. So we start up earlier and we have to break earlier.
When you hear, where were you when you go, wait, Soto got how much? 760 million? Like when you hear that, does it take your breath away or it was expected?
No, that one
took your breath away
a little bit. And that happens. I mean, listen, I can't remember watching a more talented hitter, honestly. Like he's the most fun hitter to watch in baseball. This stalks the pitcher, is decision making is impeccable. I mean, he's so great and he's so young. But yeah, that one, I mean, we were not involved, and you kind of kept hearing these different numbers and you're like, really? And then I mean that one
deferred.
Yeah, that one. Yeah, I was waiting to hear how much was deferred and wasn't deferred.
Nothing.
So, yeah, I mean, I'd be lying to say that wasn't like, oh, that's a really big deal. But he's as good a 26-year-old player as we've ever seen hit free agency.
What an at-bat he takes.
Oh, it's the best. God. I mean, it's the best.
But how long before we get $1 billion player?
I mean, I can't say never because of inflation, but I feel like the player we had the player that could have done it.
Shohei.
Yeah, and I feel like he got hurt before free agency, and that probably took away a little bit, like the ability to pitch and hit right away. But that's the player that would come to mind, where it's the marketing and the fact that you could pitch and hit. And he got 700 million. So
yeah,
I don't know. I mean, at some point, I guess it might happen, but I mean, it has to happen in a certain way. It has to be a player who's young, or it has to be a player who can literally do 2 things, and it's going to be hard to have a player as young and as talented and as pedigreed as Soto.
How do you tune out? We get them all the time, whether on the podcast or social or on radio. Like, it's ridiculous. Cubs lose a game and it's like the world ended. We got to change the management, fire the manager. This team is killing. And then they went 2 in a row and we're back. Do you tune it all out, or does it piss you off?
I've gotten better, I think, at it. I mean, I will admit, I took Twitter off my phone. I finally had to. I realized it was like, sort of doom scrolling all the time on like, you lose a game, you start going through it. And I realized like, okay, this is actually like wasting my time. I don't need to do this.
Not good for your mental health.
No. So I stopped doing that. That helped. But I mean, sitting here and saying I don't read anything is a lie, because I have to know what is going on in my job.
You read my stuff?
No, not your stuff. But I do
take that, Gordon.
I do feel like, yeah, I know what's going on, but you try to avoid that. I mean, I don't want to lose either.
Right.
And so when you're losing and that's what's going on, I feel like by definition, like, you're trying to handle your own mental health at that point. I'm pretty good about avoiding most stuff, but I will say, like, my tell is always like, if I get my good buddies, like, you doing okay? I'm like, oh, it's bad out there, huh?
Right.
If people ask how I'm doing, then I know it's bad. But listen, I want to say, I probably can say this, like, I don't think maybe 2007, maybe. Like I'm trying to think of a season that I've had that was like we didn't have a like awful month or awful dips along the way. I mean, for the most part, every season is going to have awful moments. That is like I tell myself every year, I journal a lot, and every year at the beginning of the season, I'll write that down. Like whatever you think is going to happen is not what's going to happen. You know, you have this like 6-month journey or hopefully 7-month journey that you're on, and you might end up in the place you think, but how you get there is going to be totally different. The players you think are going to be great might not be. The players you don't think are going to be great. And, you know, all whose guys are going to get hurt. And so I think realizing that like it's this crazy roller coaster ride, and that's why fans love it and they like the roller coaster ride. And so I think that the ups and downs are part of what it is to be a fan. And so when they want to vent about the bullpen after we blow a couple games, or they're mad about
You get it.
me or mad about, yeah, of course I do, because that's why you're a fan. You don't like, you're not a fan so that you can be a metronome,
Right.
And just stay, you know, oh, that's stay the course. And I think that you're a fan because you're emotional about it. You watch the games because you want to win. And so I understand why people are like that. I wouldn't have a job if people weren't like that.
We had Chris Getz sitting in that seat a week ago, and he said,
Who's that?
he likes you. He said, you guys live right by each other. He said that he was having his wife was throwing a surprise birthday party for him, 2023. And he went to her and said, hey, we don't have anything planned on that off day, do we? It's around my birthday. She's like, well, actually, yeah. He goes, I think I'm going to be named the GM that day. You got to cancel whatever you got. But he said some buddies flew in. So he did his press conference, and then he went and played golf. And he said they had a few pops. We're on the golf course. He goes, I literally got named GM that day. And one of his buddies turns to the other and goes, you may not want to check Twitter. You're getting destroyed. He said, you know, it is what it is. He goes, what am I going to do?
Yeah, no,
Try to lose only 100 games.
Right.
Yeah, it's funny because I was invited to that party, and I remember thinking, like, I knew about the party, and my wife and I were going to go, and then, you know, I was kind of talking to him throughout the process. I knew he was going to get named at that day. It was like, of all the things, like his 40th birthday party gets canceled because he gets named GM. But yeah, no, it's part of the job, and I don't know. Like, I don't think there's you're not gonna last a long time in a big market if you're not able to tune that stuff out. And it is different in a big market. I've been in both. I've been in Boston, and been in San Diego, and I've been here, and they're different jobs. I used to say that a lot when I was in San Diego. I'm like, Brian Cashman and I have the same title. We have different jobs.
Yes.
Like, you know, like it is in a small market, it is different, and there's different expectations and a different fan base. And like, you're not going to survive long here, I think, if you're not sort of able to understand that element of it. And I think I can embrace it. I think you sort of I think even having kids helps that. Like, you know, you listen to your kids talk about other sports and the way they talk about the head coach or they talk about the GM or whatever. I'm like, oh,
Hey, you know, I do that.
So
you guys saying that about me?
Yeah. So I just think that like that's part of the gig, and it's a good part. And I mean, I do think it makes me watch other sports or think about other sports differently, because I'm like, okay, like I can't be that guy that's saying things that are, you know, inflammatory, or I have to understand why this decision probably got made. So it definitely makes me watch and think about things differently, knowing that, you know, usually really smart people that are making those decisions, and they probably made them for a reason, even if they don't seem obvious at first.
Well, let me ask you this, you know, at the risk of being an asshole, or bigger asshole than most often.
We've known each other for a while.
Yeah, right.
Yeah.
You know, kind of in the vein of what you're talking about, it's been 4 or 5 years, 5 years since the Cubs made the playoffs, and there's been a few whiffs in recent years. How much do you think that your job depends on this year?
I mean, certainly I like our performance this year is going to be factored into my future, of course, as it should be. I mean, as it should be. I think that, you know, I think one of the things I'm most proud of, I think, is I knew when I took the job from Theo after COVID, I knew what we were going to have to do. And I feel like we've kind of leaned into making really hard decisions. And I think that we've built something that's really good. But yeah, I mean, of course, like that timeline is not unlimited, and I'm aware of that. And I think that, of course, this year should factor in to my future. That would be crazy if it didn't.
Last thing, and we'll let you go. There are fans out there all the time like, why don't they spend more money? I think you were at 237 last year. Is that in your mind, I got more than enough to win, or I wish we could get to where the Phillies, the Mets, whoever is,
the Yankees, the Dodgers,
I named a
the
couple.
Padres. How about the Padres?
Well, I think there's always, I mean, listen, like, spent efficiently, like, spending money can help win, but do we have enough to win? Of course we have enough to win. And I think that that's the job. And everyone, I think almost everyone, I shouldn't say everyone, but everyone has constraints in these roles. I think that, whether it's the owner, the president of business operations, me, like everyone's going to say like, this is what we want to do. And like, there are some teams that are going to say, today is the only day that matters. Let's trade the whole farm system. Like, this is what we're doing. And there's some that are rebuilding at this time. And like, most teams are in the middle of that. And so of course there's always going to be a level, there's certain, constraints on what kind of future and a team wants. You're going to have constraints on your payroll. Everyone has different constraints, and you're always working within those constraints. And I think going back to the media part or the fan base part, like, only a handful of people know exactly what, a given president or GM has been told. Here's what we want. Here's what the boss wants. And so I do think every team is working with some level of constraint, some level of eye on the future, and some level of some eye on the present. And you're always kind of balancing those things out.
Hey, so that was supposed to be the last thing. What's going to be the headline at Cubs convention? Is it going to be a surprise like they used to try to have every year, or is it going to be up to Crane?
Well, I think the Sammy thing, like, I don't think there's much we're going to do to beat that. I mean, I've been here 14 years. I've never met the guy.
You think you'll recognize him?
I'm excited.
He looks a little different than he used to.
Or his office in Florida 3 times.
Yeah, no,
Yeah,
I mean,
you'll enjoy it.
I think that'll be the biggest headline. I mean, I think that the guy had 60 homers 3 times,
right.
And
Pretty amazing.
I remember going to a game in *98 just as a fan, sitting in the bleachers, and I was never
at Wrigley.
Yeah, I was in town visiting a buddy, and they played the Astros in like a weekend series in August. I remember going to the game, and it was just awesome. And like the Sammy thing was at like the fever pitch. I was like,
where were you working at the time?
Where was I at 25? I think I was working back at Wesleyan at the time.
Uh-huh.
But I went to visit my best friend from high school. He was living out here, working at a trading firm, and we went to a game. It was a Saturday, August game against the Astros, and it was, like I said, it was awesome. It was an awesome fan.
Did he hit one?
I don't think he hit one, but I remember he did the run out to the outfield, and it was just like the coolest thing. And I'd been to Wrigley a number of times prior to working here, obviously, even prior to working in baseball, but that was the coolest experience. And that was as adored a player as I've ever seen in person. That was really cool. And so I think that'll be the headline. But no, I'm excited. I mean, listen, this is I guess not my 14th convention because we missed a couple, but at least my 12th. And I know you've done a ton of them.
30.
And you know what? It is a good moment in the winter when it's freezing. And as Gordon said earlier, it's always cold.
Always.
It's always like the coldest weekend of the year.
So it's a good time to talk about baseball and not bemoan the fact that you're stuck inside for the whole weekend.
Hey, thanks for being here.
Always.
Yeah,
Anytime. Appreciate
We'll get you back.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Wait,
All right.
anytime? Do you mean that?
What's that?
You said anytime.
Well, I say anytime, and then it'll be hard to schedule me.
Yes.
Oh,
yeah.
We'll get you again. There he is. That is the president of the Chicago Cubs. That is Jed Hoyer. That's Gordon. I'm Cap. You can subscribe. You can get the audio version anywhere you get your favorite podcasts, and subscribe right here to our YouTube channel, The Recap. Have a great rest of your day. Take that.